Bending is one of the most unique aspects of playing guitar. In this video, I'm going to break down how you can approach getting started with bending and just some of the mistakes you want to try to avoid when you get started. Bending involves either pushing the string up or pulling it down. And the funny thing about bending a note is that whether you push it up or pull it down, the pitch always goes up. So what that means is if I bend up, the pitch goes up. If I pull the string down, the pitch also goes up. So whether you go up or pull down, the pitch will go up. Now we have two main types of bends. We have a half step bend and a whole step bend. And it's pretty simple. A half step would be from one fret to the next. So from like fret 7 to fret 8, that's a half step. Whole step would be from fret 7 to fret 9. Half step bends are less painful and easier to get at first. Whole step bends are a little bit further and a little bit trickier to get. But I would recommend you just start with a half step and then you try to nail that one first before you move on to the whole step bends, because the whole step bend is going to require you to use a little bit more pressure to push the note up to where it needs to go. Now you must keep pressure on the string when you're pushing or pulling. So your finger has to remain down as you push up. If you let go or you release the pressure, then you're going to kill the note and you're going to sound like this. Like that. And the note's going to die. Happens even if you're pulling down. You're going to lose that note. I see a lot of students when they start doing this, they release the tension on their finger and they don't push the string all the way up while that pressure is down. So the note dies and they get frustrated because of that. So you're going to try to practice just keeping the pressure and as you push or you pull. And you don't really need to worry about pitch at this point. You're just trying to either push or pull without the note dying on you. Now, although you can bend with just one finger, I don't recommend you do that, especially when you're starting out to do this. If you bend with just one finger, for one, it's just a lot more painful than when you have reinforcement from these other fingers. But it can also like pull a tendon in your muscle and that can hurt really bad. And if you've never done it, trust me, you don't want to do it. I've pulled a tendon in my index finger and it took months for that thing to heal. And even to this day, I have to be very aware of how much pressure I'm putting on the string because I can pull that tendon again and it is super painful. So anyway, when you're going to go and start bending, I recommend, you use the third finger or the ring finger. Okay, so fingers 1, 2, and 3. I would say 1 is like the most painful, although you can get away with some bends that I'll go over later on. I would say try to stick to using either fingers 2, 3, or 4 when you start bending. So we'll use finger 3 for right now. But basically, just to go over sort of the technique, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my finger, let's just say it's on the 7th fret of the G string, right? The ring finger is going to be there, and fingers 1 and 2 are going to go on frets 5 and 6 right behind it. So you're going to have index finger on 5, middle finger on 6, and your ring finger on 7. And that's going to be the finger that's going to do the bending. And these other two fingers are going to be like your reinforcement to help you push. What you don't want to do is try to cram all 3 fingers onto the same fret. Give them some space and let them hang out on each of these other frets. They don't all need to be on the same fret. They just have to be on the same string, right? And they're all going to push together when we get to this point. Now, you're basically just supporting your ring finger with these other 2 fingers. So one thing I want to point out here is when you're bending, you're sort of doing a twist motion. I always tell my students, think about like if you're opening a door handle, right? Or a doorknob, you're gonna twist the doorknob, right? That's sort of the motion that you're making with your wrist here. It's sort of like this, right? A lot of people think that it's all this motion where you're just pushing or pulling like this, but really it's a combination of the two. You're sort of twisting and simultaneously sort of doing a push. One other thing I want to mention is where your thumb goes when you're bending. So when I bend, I tend to put my thumb on top and it helps me create this squeezing motion as I'm doing this twist and this push with my fingers. I'm sort of squeezing also with the thumb on top of the neck of the guitar. And that helps me to push up. So it's not just only the twist and the push, it's sort of like a squeeze. You use your thumb to kind of help you. If you leave your thumb in the back, It makes it a little bit harder to push up. You can still do it, but it's a little bit tricky, and it's much easier if you use that leverage from your thumb to push. So it's going to look like that. And that's when I'm pushing up. And if I'm pulling down, it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same thing. It's almost like I'm doing like this. And I'm tugging my fingers in as I'm sort of twisting. Now I'm exaggerating the twist here. It's not as drastic as that, but that's the motion that my wrist is making as I'm bending, okay? When you want to actually start matching pitch, what I always recommend you do is you play the note you intend to bend to. Now when you're bending, for example here, if I go from 7 to 9, I would play the 9 first, get that sound in my ear, and then I'm going to try to bend until I match that pitch. Okay, now this can be tricky at first. Some people just can't hear it, and other people just have trouble getting the bend up to that pitch. So now as a tip, if you have trouble hearing the pitch, right, what you can do is use your handy dandy tuner here, and you would play the note that you're going to bend to. So in this case, I'm going to play the 8th fret on the B string, and that's going to tell me it's a G note, okay? Now when I go to bend from fret 7, I'm going to try to bend and get that note pretty much in pitch. Try to get that in camera there. So I play the note first, it's a G, and then I bend from. To get it in pitch. There it is. That is a good way to visually represent the note that you're trying to hit. Now another visual tip that I can tell you is when you bend a note, you're going to bump into the string that's right above it. So I'm going to come up here again, and it would look like this. So if I'm bending fret 7 to fret 8, I'm on the B string here. My B string, my finger here is going to bump into the G string. So I don't know if you can see this. Let me get a little bit closer. I'm going to bend until I start to bump into that G string. That's going to give me a half step. Okay. Likewise, if I wanted to go a whole step, so from 7 to 9, I'm going to bend until I bump into the D string. Half step. Now, obviously, you're going to have to practice this until you get some kind of consistency and stability between the notes that you're bending to. But these are two tips that are super helpful when I try to get students to just start hitting the note right. Now, the next step that I want to talk about that you have to be aware of. At first, this is going to be incredibly difficult probably for you to do, but you want to be aware of this. You want to make sure you're muting other strings while you're bending, right? So to avoid accidentally ringing out unintended strings, you have to use your right hand, your picking hand, to mute unintended strings. So what that means is, like, if I'm bending the B string, okay, my right hand should be sitting on the strings above the string that my left hand is actually playing. So in this case, I'm playing the B string, and I am muting with my right hand the E, A, D, and G. And my hand is literally just sitting there. Okay? And just so you can kind of see this also, so I'm playing 7, I'm playing the B string, and my hand is sitting on these strings. It's a very personal kind of thing when you're bending. Your hand's not really out here. You have a lot more likelihood of either bumping some other strings or just unintentionally having some strings just sort of ring out while you're bending. And then the left hand, believe it or not, is muting strings underneath. So this hand is muting strings above the finger that is bending, and the left hand is muting the strings below it. Sounds like a lot, right? But if I'm on the G string here and I'm bending, this hand over here is kind of muting all these strings on the high end, and this hand is muting all these guys. Finally, here are some common mistakes people make. Number one is they're using the wrong motions. They do all pushing and no twisting. You have to do a light twist with your right hand when you bend these notes, and you have to remember that. You don't want to try to just push with just your fingers. It's just not going to work. There has to be more of a twist because it's combined. It's twist and light push. It's not all push. Okay? That's the first one. The next one is a weak bend, right? So if you use one finger, you're probably going to get a weak bend. If I'm trying to bend like this, I'm just not going to be able to do it. I want to use these other fingers as reinforcement to push or to pull. Now, a general rule of thumb is that I'm going to be pushing up the high E string, the B string, and the G string can either go, you could either push it or pull it, right? But the D string, A string, and low E string, they're all pulls. And the reason for that is because if I pull the B string, for example, I'm going to flop off the fretboard. Same thing with the high E. If I pull it, I just go, the string just falls off the fretboard. The G, it's kind of hard to pull it off the fretboard, so you can go either way. But again, with the low strings, if I push them up, I'm going to fall off the fretboard, fall off the fretboard. The D string, you could sort of go either way. Another mistake people make is they overbend the note, right? So they want to bend from 7 to 9, and they go too far. Sometimes you want to go farther, but in this case, we just want to go right to that pitch. So you have to be careful you don't overbend. Bending under strings. This is one too. This sometimes happens with people if they have high action on their guitar. I notice they'll bend and their fingers end up actually like underneath the strings, you know? They end up stuck under the strings and they grab them sometimes. So they'll go like up and then they'll like grab them on the way down. My action's so low, my fingers can't even really get under the strings there. But what sometimes people do is they'll bend up, grab some strength, and then pull down all these strings on the release. So you want to make sure that your fingers are bent as you're pushing, right? And you're bending from the tips so that they don't get stuck. If they're flat, they're gonna try to pull these other strings. You don't want to do that. So here's the exercise I recommend you learn how to do. It's gonna sound like this. See if you know what this is. Happy birthday. Just that little part of the melody. Happy birthday to you. Now, the reason I like this melody for bending is because it includes both a half step and a whole step. And the notes that I'm going to be bending is on the B string, the 12th fret, I'm going to bend a half step to fret 13. So I'm going to be O. So I'll play first the melody so you can see it without bending. Now with bending. One more time. And basically you're doing a half step bend from 12 to 13. You're going to hold it and play that note. So it's a bend, hold, and then a release. So the first note's bent, and then you play the note again while it's bent. So I'm bending up a half step, playing it at the top, and then releasing it. And that's the happy birth, and then back to 8 day, bend up to 10, 2, release you. You can also practice this happy birthday melody on all the other strings. So let's try on the high E string, the B string, the G string, the D string, the A string, and the low E string. I think that's a great melody to work on bending with. I hope you guys have fun doing this. It's going to teach you both half step and whole step bends. I'd really appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel, and you can also check out my guitar flashcards, which are sold on my website, tunedinguitarcourses.com, or you can also find them on Amazon. They're called the Fretboard Memorization Deck. There's going to be lots of educational material on this channel. There's going to be all kinds of pedal reviews and just kinds of things that I'm working on myself personally. And I don't know, I'm going to be taking requests from you guys to upload stuff. So if you want to see a video on a specific topic, please comment on my videos. Let me know what you want to learn about. Thanks.